All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our last presentation of today. Welcome back. We are here at Central States for the third year with a hybrid event. So we have people in person here in Schaumburg and then people watching live online over Zoom as part of the NNP Symposium. The symposium is sponsored by the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society, and our physical space here in Schaumburg is sponsored by Heritage. So grateful to both of them for letting this happen. For our last presentation today, we have part of the Nebraska State Showcase. So Central States last year started doing an annual state showcase where they highlight one of their member states, starting with Iowa. This year is Nebraska. So we will be hearing from Mark Engler, who is the former superintendent of the Homestead National Historical Park in Nebraska, and learning about the Homestead Quarter and how it came to be. So we'll be back at the end for a Q&A, but I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. And what we're going to talk about this afternoon is the Homestead story, the Homestead Quarter, and Homestead National Historical Park. So we'll be talking about those three things, and with that, we'll also be sharing a couple short videos and to hopefully make this fun. But before I get into that, I guess I just want to just share a little bit more about myself. I was park superintendent at Homestead National Historical Park for nearly 25 years. I had a 44-year career with the National Park Service, but so I no longer speak for the National Park Service, but I'm happy to help them as a volunteer and do other things to support our national parks. And one of the cool things that I worked on as while I was employed and while I was working there at Homestead was the launch of the quarter, and I was a liaison with the U.S. Mint and liaison with the community, and was very grateful that it was a great experience, and so this afternoon I'll be sharing some of those events along with, like I said earlier, the Homestead story and Homestead National Historical Park. Before I get into that, though, I think it's important that I start out by thanking a number of people. I know Mitch Ernest, president of the Central States Numismatic Society. He asked me to be here today and to share our story. So I want to give a special shout out to Mitch to thank him for that invitation. And as well, I think it's important that I say thank you to the Newman Numismatic Society, Educational Society, for helping to sponsor this event. I also think it's important that I give a shout out to John Veach, who's here, and John's from Nebraska, and had a lot of conversations with John and also Verge Marshall early on through this process, and Verge is no longer with us, but Verge's work within the with the Homestead Quarter and that whole process is very much appreciated. I think it's also important to say thank you to the governor of Nebraska at that point in time, Dave Heineman. He was a governor for 10 years in Nebraska. And he was the one who selected Homestead to represent the state. And so I think it's important that we give him a special shout out, as well as First National Bank of Omaha, where they were the exchange bank, and they took care of having the money, the armored car show up and get the money wherever it needed to go and all that business. And of course, then Gage County, with their officers, the city of Beatrice, the Beatrice Public Schools, University of Nebraska at Lincoln, as well as the U.S. Mint. They were all great to work with and played a very important role in this whole process. And we'll be discovering some of their roles here later on. To start, I think it's important that we talk a little bit about the Homestead Act of 1862. I don't know if everybody here knows about the Homestead Act, recognizes what the Homestead Act is. It was a law that was signed in 1862 by President Abraham Lincoln, and And through this law, 160 acres were distributed to those people filing for that claim, and they would get that 160 acres as long as they live on the land for 5 years, make improvements to it, like building a house and growing a crop. And like I said, they had to do it for 5 years. And people were very successful and doing this. And in fact, you will see many references to the homestead story in pulp culture today. You'll see, I'm sure everybody here has seen the show Little House on the Prairie. And also, how about the Far and Away? And maybe some of the folks here have also seen the movie Shane, where Shane, defended the Sodbusters and trying to get rid of the bad guys. So this story is in pop culture. You can see it also on game days on Saturdays with the Oklahoma Sooners, the Boomer Sooner wagon coming out and going up and down the football field. And you can also recognize this story as you're walking or as you're driving through the countryside, driving through the interstate, when you drive by all those farmsteads that are out there producing food, which is the backbone. This law is at the backbone of our nation's great agricultural might, and as our declaring ourselves as an agricultural superpower, which is feeding the world. Which states are homesteading states? The ones in brown, there are 30 homesteading states in all. And I think it's quite ironic that states such as Florida, states such as California, the Dakotas, they're all homestead states. In fact, I think it's hard to believe that some of these places where the government gave away free land, that today this land is considered some of the most valuable land that there is in the United States, like in the Florida Keys, like at Cape Canaveral in Florida, where our space program is launched from. I think it's also ironic that not only is there land like that in Florida, but we can also find it in California at Knoxberry Farm. You can also find it across the the Southwest, and looking closer at New Mexico, where we can look closer and dive into the Manhattan Project and see that that project took place actually on land that was originally owned by homesteaders. So this law is not only a Nebraska, something that impacted Nebraska, but it really impacted much of the world that we live in. And I think it's also important to realize that it did not only impact farmsteads, people moving to create farms, but it also impacted our nation from an industrial standpoint, because each of these farmers, they needed to find ways to make their life simpler by improving the efficiencies on the farm. It also had a huge impact upon the immigration of this country, because part of the homestead deal was you did not have to be a citizen of the United States, did not have to be a citizen to claim land through this law. You just had to promise the United States government that you'd become a citizen, and if you're successful living on the land, making improvements to it over 5 years, that land would be yours. We can also look at the law and how it impacted the Civil War. Lincoln, he was looking for ways to ensure the North's success during this time, and he wanted to make sure people sympathetic with the North's view were settling those Western states, and the Homestead Act was one of those ways to do it. We can also look at the impact that that law had in some states, not all states, on native populations and also on those natural ecosystems. But the Homestead Act, it had a huge impact upon the agriculture production, as I alluded to earlier. And I think the law can be declared, I know the law can be declared to be really at our backbone, our nation's backbone of creating an agricultural superpower. I have a short video here that I'd like to just share with you that maybe will make this presentation a little more resonate with you today.
134 years ago, Harvey Miracle cast his eyes over 320 acres of waist-high bluestem grass blowing under a sweet May sky, accompanied by nothing but the Beaver Creek winding through the valley.
This is a very special piece of ground. And over there you can see Harvey Miracle's grave, and then this is my grandfather's grave right here.
Under the Homestead Act of 1862, Harvey selected 160 acres, which he would be obligated to reside on for 5 years, make improvements, and grow a crop.
We're not here to get rich quick. We're here to be here for a long, long time. And so it does affect some of the decisions you make.
The house Harvey built is still standing and is recorded as the oldest frame house still in use in Boone County.
Most people put up sod houses, but Harvey hauled all of his lumber from Columbus.
I know that without the farm, I wouldn't be the person that I'm proud to be. I know that it's impossible to instill that pride in someone without a basis of agriculture behind them. My father is connected to our farm just as every Miracle man before him was. I love our family farm and could not ask for any better way to grow up. My dad has included my 3 siblings and myself as active members in our operation.
Okay, come on. We'll grab the buckets. Okay. You take this to the pickup, Carson?
Yep. The dream, of course, is for Brian and the twins to take over the farm and to continue farming.
Harvey Miracle's passion for agriculture and his homesteading spirit has lived on through the Miracle name. My siblings and I are proud of our family farm and our heritage. I am sure each one of us plans to pass that pride and passion on to our children, so that the spirit of the homesteader will always live on.
I'm excited for the future of agriculture. They viewed this as an opportunity, and I think it's still an opportunity.
The Homestead Act by the numbers. I mentioned to you earlier, you had to have the government gave you 160 acres of land in most places of the United States, not all places, but where the land was fertile, the land was good to grow in. It was 160 acres, and that happened in 30 states. Some of the southwestern states like Arizona, New Mexico, even western Nebraska, it'd be 640 acres that they would give you. And all 270 million acres was settled through this law. That's roughly 10% of all the land in the United States and in the lower 48. And today they're an estimated 93 million descendants. And so I can only guess that some of you that's listening online or sitting here in the room with us today are directly tied to this story and are descendants of those people who changed our nation acre by acre. The law was in effect over 124 years, so it's a relatively new thing from the standpoint that it was, again, signed by President Abraham Lincoln, and it ended during the Reagan administration, and with Alaska being the last state where homesteading took place. Homestead National Historical Park, which is located in southeast Nebraska, with 4 miles from Beatrice, Nebraska, or 35 miles south of Lincoln, or 15 miles north of Wymore, is where we celebrate or commemorate this story. And here you can see the Palm Leopard cabin, which is on the reverse side of that homestead quarter. And we'll talk more about that a little later. But Homestead National Historical Park is a site, like I said, that commemorates the law and the impacts it brought not only to the United States, but to the world. But also, as importantly, it commemorates and highlights families like the Miracle family and the other 93 million descendants that have family that's tied to this story. It's honoring their tenacity, their innovation, their determination. And at Homestead, which is a National Park Service site, and it's been a National Park Service site for 89 years, so it's one of the older sites within the National Park system. And I think that everybody can recognize other parks in the system, such as Yellowstone, Yosemite, and Gettysburg. And well, anyway, we're all about the Homestead Act. The Homestead Heritage Center is one of the National Park Service's newest visitor centers. And this building, it was designed to look like a plow pushing through the sod. So you see that whip on it. The glass is looking, and the building is pointing is directly west. So you're looking out those glass windows, a glass curtain to the west. So as it tells the story of how our nation was settled from east to west. Inside of it, you'll find the National Homestead Museum, where you'll learn about those stories that I mentioned earlier. You'll learn about how this law impacted our nation from an industrial standpoint. You'll learn how this story impacted immigration, and you'll learn such things like Ellis Island. Some people are surprised to learn that those peak years at Ellis Island were also peak years within the Homesteading Act. And so you'll learn about those things. You'll find also historic furniture, historic implements, farm implements. You'll also be able to look in and get an idea of the museum collection and archival storage that's kept there, which is over 500,000 items. Beyond the museum part, or within the museum part, you can also see this tractor, which belonged to the last homesteader in the nation, which person was from Alaska. Ken Deerdorf was his name. You can even become a junior ranger if you want, and you can even research your family's homestead history. And right now, 10 of the 30 homesteading states records are online, and if you're a genealogist, you'll want to find these records because there's all sorts of cool information in them. This information will include birth certificates, deaths, information on deaths. You'll find out what kind of crops they raised, livestock they had. You'll find out what kind of furniture they had in their homes. You'll find out about what kind of buildings they erected, fences they built. So the information in here, in these records, is very rich in content. And in fact, the people at the National Archives say that of all the records that they maintain, these records are really the nation's second most information rich from. So there's also trails to walk. You can walk through our nation's second oldest restored tallgrass prairie. You can walk through forests. You can rub up against huge cottonwood trees and cross streams, and you can picnic, and you can visit other historic buildings like the Freeman School and those sort of things. But one of our big challenges and I'm going to switch gears here now to the quarter is how do you tell this story from the standpoint of placing an image on the quarter, and how do you tell that homestead story on a quarter? And I don't know, we thought it was pretty challenging because, the law was so unique and in many, many ways. And it had such a tremendous impact upon not only the United States, but to the world, as I've shared with you. So one of the things that we did at Homestead was actually found a donor to pay for an artist from the Mint to come out and spend time with us and to help us capture this story on the quarter. And these are most of the candidate quarters, I believe that they call them, that artist came up with. And from that, then I guess I should something that we tried to do with this artist while he was there in southeast Nebraska with us is we took him to like the local sale barn, and so that they could experience what a sale of cattle and other livestock was like, and to get the smell and to have that total experience. We also took them to a grain elevator and had the people that managed the grain elevator show them how that worked. And we drove through the countryside looking at how those sections are laid out and the pivot irrigations, all those things that we see from planes that many people, they wonder, what is that? And so we're trying to get him to have a feel and an understanding for this, along with the value of the family farm and that generations there that are carried on by many of the farms. And from that experience, these are the 10 candidate quarters that were produced. And of course, we know which one was selected. And it wasn't until we got to the Citizens Coinage Advisory Committee in Washington where they actually made the final decision on which was to be selected. And something else that was really unique in working with that group is I was actually invited to their meeting and participated in their meeting, which was really pretty unusual and rare within this series of coins, from the standpoint that most parks did not participate in their meetings. Park liaisons did not participate in their meetings, and thus they did not have a chance to have a lot of interaction with them from the standpoint of sharing the narrative. Again, what design image best represents the Homestead Act? Again, it was a tough decision on how to do that and what image would best represent it. And we all know what ended up on the quarter. And with that, I'm guessing that not many people know or recognize that the image is to highlight or showcase those important elements that what make the homesteader successful. One, the food that they raised, not only for themselves, but food to feed the world. Shelter, they all had to be able to protect themselves from the environment and to have a place to operate out of their home base, and that was the shelter. And then of course water. Can't grow anything, you can't survive yourself without water. And so anyway, that's the design. And the artist was Ron Sanders. I don't know if anybody knows Ron or is familiar with his work, but Ron is the artist that we can thank for the Homestead Quarter. Moving to the coin launch, we had our ceremony at the Beatrice High School, which in attendance we had 1,800 people. And in attendance included students not only from Beatrice High, but I think Wymore students were there, and the students from other neighboring schools, along with the citizens throughout southeast Nebraska. And I believe Mitch Ernest, he was there with us as well. I mentioned Mitch earlier. One of the things that we showed, we had there to greet students that morning in February 15th, I believe was the 10th, I believe was the date, was an ice sculpture of the quarter. And I understand that the Homestead Quarter has a couple of errors with it. It has the leaky bucket and snow on the roof and some other die cast issues, but I don't know if any of these errors can be found within this eye sculpture. But I thought it was a pretty cool thing, and the kids really enjoyed it, along with the other people there attending the ceremony. Our ceremony was quite different than most, and because we involved the students and high school students in most every aspect of the program. And here on the left, you'll see the group of students that actually designed and made a pump there that they released the quarters in, and they came screaming out, as you can see there on the right, where the lieutenant governor for the state of Nebraska, Mr. Foley, is lifting up the lever. So then the quarter exchange, I've mentioned him before. There's Mitch, and he's showing off with some of the quarters that he collected. And one of the fun things that I think that happened is I think the people from the U.S. Mint were surprised at the number of quarters that were exchanged that day. I recall that there's around $40,000 that were exchanged in quarters in the afternoon, and not all people who wanted quarters that day were served, though, because the Home Shopping Network, they showed up and they wanted to buy like $20,000 or $30,000 worth of quarters, and their purchase was denied. But we had the post offices there doing cancellations on the rolls, and the Friends of Homestead, they were there serving cookies that had the design of the quarter on it, as well as cake, and the Friends also put together special quarter packages with the P and the D's, and then our cooperating association, they were selling S's and bullions and everything else. So it was a fun afternoon that was attended by many people. One of the other unusual things that happened that we were really excited about was that night after we had the coin pour and the coin exchange, we actually had a coin giveaway. And so we traveled to Lincoln, the home of the Cornhuskers, and we attended the men's basketball game between the University of Wisconsin and the University of Nebraska. And as part of that program, as people were coming into the game, we gave out thousands of quarters to the fans. And so, and that was courtesy of First National Bank of Omaha that provided those quarters for us. And so we were able to stay and watch the rest of the game, and the staff in uniform, many of the staff members in uniform were there to hand out and to interact with the crowd. And they played a video about the quarters on the big screens, and also that was all pretty cool. Just real quick, the Homestead Quarter by the numbers. You can see it, 214 million P's, 248,600,000 D's, and 1,135,000 uncirculated, 831 proof, and 35,000 bullions, silver bullions, 21,286 regular bullions, and all 465.4 million quarters were released. And I don't know about people who live outside of the southeast Nebraska, but in southeast Nebraska, we don't really see the quarter. And I think everybody that finds one puts it in their drawer and saves it. And even when I know we travel outside of southeast Nebraska, they're really hard to find. So anyway, I'd like to think that they're all very special quarters, and because of that, people don't want to keep their hands on it. My next short video here, and this video was shared at the coin pour that took place there in Beatrice on the day of the celebration and release of the quarter. In closing, I'd just like to ask, how much is a quarter worth? What can we really buy with a quarter? Can't really buy much anymore. What's that quarter worth from the standpoint of community pride? Because I know that day throughout southeast Nebraska and eastern Nebraska, there's a lot of pride in that quarter and a lot of pride in that story. But also, what about it on a bigger scale from the standpoint of what the America the Beautiful Quarter Series stands for and what it represents, from the standpoint that on these quarters, you're going to find some of our nation's most important places: Yellowstone, Yosemite, Gettysburg, Ellis Island, Tuskegee National Historical Park. You're going to find these places like Homestead that represent a part of our society, a part of our national psychic. And I think it's important that we stop and recognize what those quarters stand for, and the importance that it is to us as a nation that these public lands have, and the responsibility that all of us have in taking care of these treasured places, these cherished places. And I think these quarters go a long way in helping us do that. And so anyway, thanks for being here.
All right. Then we do stay in the frame. Thank you. So we do have time for a Q&A after this one. So do we have any questions? Yes.
You mentioned a database of homestead people. Is that just of homestead people, or is it part of a much larger database?
It's much larger. Homestead is a part of that database, and the records are in different places, and depending on where. Can I ask what state you're from?
Well, I'm from Illinois, Missouri, but I'm interested in Oklahoma.
You're interested in Oklahoma. The Oklahoma homestead records are not online yet, but saying that, if your descendants were not homesteaders, they can still go to the government land office website, and there's a search engine there that you can go and look up land records, and it could be through the Timber Culture Act, or it could be through some other land law where you can go and look for those records. If you can't find your family on that GLO, Government Land Office website, which is under the Bureau of Land Management, you can write the National Archives, Archives 1, Washington, D.C., and that's where like the homestead records are kept, and you can go there and ask them to help you find your family's records. One of the things that'd be really important if you send them a letter is that you give them, if you know the legal land description, which unfortunately most people don't, that would help them try to find that information. But I would start with looking at the GLO, Government Land Office records on that BLM site, and there are millions of records on that site. And if you can't find them there, you'll need to write to the National Archives, Archives 1, Washington, D.C.
All right, and just remember, if you're watching online, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and send in your questions there. We will not read off your name unless you put it in the content of your question, so that will not be shared. Otherwise, I'm going to turn the screen share off. Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, there's one online. Mitch Ernst is online. He says, please remind everyone to pick up their free homestead quarter at the Central States table. Good to know.
That's true. And thank you, Mitch, for reminding us everybody can get their quarter at the table.
You said that you were the first guy to go to that commission. Was Nebraska the first one to have a pre-launch too? Because I remember going to Homestead the night before.
And I should clarify, I don't know if I was one of the very few, if not the first to go to that meeting. So there could have been somebody, another park to do that, but I don't know of another park to do that. And I think it was common for the event the night before for the parks.
I think the CCAG meetings are public, so people
Right.
could go,
Right.
but no one just took the interest.
Cause at the pre-launch, there was probably, what, 200-300 people there?
Oh, there was for the
I mean,
pre-launch.
There was people everywhere.
Right. So, and it's so funny because the people from the Mint, they brought special posters they had designed and they had those up on our doors and even at the school. And we didn't know that everybody would want those. And so people were like actually pulling them off the door and taking them home as souvenirs. And once we realized what was going on, we thought, oh, you guys, you can't be taking that stuff. And but anyway, it was a great event. I know people traveled from across the United States to be there with us at that launch and also that Monday night prior. Part of the 300 that were there at our education center for that program. So,
All right. Any other questions?
Do you know if the Iowa records are online yet?
I think they are. And just to be honest with you about Iowa is a very small homestead state.
Oh,
So there's not going to be very many homesteads from Iowa, but I do believe that Iowa is their records have been digitized and can be found. And again, you can find the patent on that GLO site. And if you do find, and I should have mentioned this earlier, if you do find a patent, you need to go to a Fold 3 site, which is they're a subsidiary of Ancestry. And the Fold 3 site is where you can find the case file. And the case file is where you're going to find all this really good information. And the patent is where you're going to find your legal land description.
All
And
right.
it's a case file is what you want. That's the important thing. That's what you want, the case file.
So a homestead was different from a land grant? 'Cause I've got some land grants from the Nebraska Territory where they give, it would be like a veteran of the War of 1812 got, 60 acres in Odo County, even though he was living in Pennsylvania.
It'd be different things. And it's like you explained, John, that a lot of people receive land grants from their time and serving in the military. And one of the things that was going on with the homestead story, and it's leading up to the time when Lincoln signed the Homestead Act, and I'm getting a little off track now. There's a lot of controversy. Much like there's controversy today about some things, there was a lot of controversy back in the early 1860s, late 1850s. Should we have a Homestead Act or shouldn't we have a Homestead Act? And in fact, there are Heritage Center, you're going to find a copy of the Republican Party's party platform that goes into like, if we're elected, we're going to push through the Homestead Act, which they did win, and they did push it through, and part of it was because the 37th Congress was reduced in size and because of the Civil War. And then at the same time that the Homestead Act was going through Congress, the Homestead Act was signed May 20th, 1862, and right after the Homestead Act, within weeks, the Pacific Railway Act was signed, which gave away over 1 million acres, and then also the Morrill College Act was signed, and I think everybody knows about the Moral College Act the Moral Act, from the standpoint it established our state universities and state colleges. And like Iowa State, University of Nebraska, and the list goes on. I think there's 93 in all. And each state received 30 acres, they're not 30,000 acres to sell, distribute, to use in building their universities. And that was also all these three laws were all signed within a very narrow window. And then on top of it, a law established in the United States Department of Agriculture was in that pile too. So a lot going on at that time, and it had a tremendous impact upon the world in which we live in today.
All right, any other questions?
Well, I hope it's an easy question, softball. If there's 30 states involved, why in the world do they put it in Nebraska?
That's a good question, and I can answer that question.
Good.
And that is, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that in my presentation, and that is because the first homestead in the nation was there in on the site that the park is located. A guy by the name of Daniel Freeman, he was from Ohio. He had heard about this law. He wanted to file a claim. So before midnight, he traveled to Brownsville, Nebraska, found the land agent, got the land agent to open up the land office early, shortly after New Year's, and they proceeded to to get all the paperwork in line, and then he was also the first to actually prove and fulfill the requirements of the law. And the reason I mention that is because there are a number of people that wanted to challenge who was the first, and in fact, some history on the park side of things. South Dakota, they tried to say, oh, the monument should actually be in South Dakota, this National Park Service site, because we actually had the first one, and so we looked at it closer and found out that no, Freeman, he actually fulfilled the requirements. The story is important because our regional director at the time, and I can't tell you that person's name, I don't remember, but he said that this National Park Service site is not about the first homesteader, it's about all homesteaders. And we're not moving Homestead National Historical Park, it was Homestead National Monument of America at that time. We're not moving this site to South Dakota. It's staying in Nebraska. But I do think it's a good reminder to us that, and I tried to communicate that during my presentation, that this park is not to the first, it's not only to the first, but to all people who homesteaded. And it's to all people that were really involved within this huge movement. Those people even work in the factories. And it's hard to believe when you look at photographs, the thousands of people in there making plows, building equipment, and taking care of livestock. It's just like, it was an army of people that were at work. It was an army of people that were making changes to this nation. And while most of it was, in middle America, it was happening throughout all these homestead states. And in fact, for middle America, it's probably middle America's Mayflower story. And but it's a story that really doesn't get told very well, or a lot of it's not told within our textbooks. Usually gets a page or maybe even a paragraph. And in fact, historians have said that of all the laws ever created by our nation, this law is probably one of the three most important or significant laws that our nation's ever put in motion. And in fact, the law is very well received by people on the right and people on the left, and both sides have recognized what this law has done. In fact, today many communities, small communities, trying to grow their population, they try to enact their own version of the Homestead Act, or they try to by attracting people, by giving them, I'll give you a free lot if you build a home on it. And some communities will even give you like I don't know, $10,000, $5,000 if you do that. In fact, I know that here, like, I'm going to say 7, 8 years ago, then Senator Chuck Hale with the senator from North Dakota, they introduced the new Homestead Opportunities Act into the Senate and the Congress, where they're trying to do some of the same things that the original Homestead Act did in trying to stop the outmigration and bring more people in. Even Vladimir Putin with Russia looked at doing something like this, as I understand, and trying to draw in people to Siberia. And so it's an interesting story, and it's one that for 124 years it worked, and it's had a profound impact upon our nation and the world.
All right. Anything else? No? Do we have any online? Nope. All right. Then that's going to wrap us up. Thank you so much for getting
Thank
out
you.
here, taking the time to present. So this is our last presentation for today. Thank you all for sticking around till the end of them. If you are following along with the Nebraska State Showcase, the fourth and final presentation in that series will be at 10:30 tomorrow morning with Matt Hansen on the Jerome Walton collection of Nebraska National Banknotes and its digital preservation. So I hope to see you all for that one. But before that, we have a talk at 9 a.m. On counterfeit Ichibu silver coins from Japan by Ben Dalgleish. I recently learned I was saying his last name wrong for years. So that's good. All right, so I hope to see you all back in the morning. All of the recordings will be available in about 2 weeks. If you are not on our email list and would like to be, you can sign up online at nnpsymposium.org. If you scroll down on the homepage, there's a place to subscribe. Or if you're here in person, there's a piece of paper in the back of the room. Now, by the light switch, no longer the plastic cups. It has moved. So we invite you to sign up for that. Otherwise, thank you all so much, and we'll see you bright and early in the morning.
I left a stack of brochures from Homestead on the back chair. So as you're leaving, if you want one, just feel free to grab one.